Hey guys, welcome to Straight Talk. You know, what I want to talk about today is the little things that we do over the long haul that become big mistakes. And the thing that's really important about that is in the short term, you would not think that it would make that much difference. And you're probably right. But it's the long term that I'm always thinking about. Long term for people is a very difficult thing to accomplish. Most people fail in their whatever exercise or training routine. Most people fail in the long haul as far as really sticking with it. Most people are on a roller coaster ride as a result. And look, that turns into all kinds of problems because most people are frustrated. They think that they should be getting more out of their workout. They should be getting more from their diet. But it's the little things that they're not paying attention to that really is a cause of the problem. And again, I don't know how many times I've talked about the process. It's a building process, and you need to develop anything that you're doing as a regimen. You need to develop it in little baby steps that turn into giant results, okay? So let's start with that, and then we'll get going here on the things I think that you should be focusing on. Here's one thing. You're probably changing your workouts too soon. Most people do. And surprisingly, most trainers do that are working with people. It's not unusual for this to happen. But let me give you the why, because the why is very important. As your trainer, and as your client, you should be asking your trainer the why if they're not telling you that. If they're not telling you the why when you're doing something, if they're asking you to do something, then that might be a red flag if you're that person working with the trainer. Otherwise, if you're doing your own thing, you're probably changing your workout too soon. And here's the reason why. Your brain adapts to an environment sooner than the muscle. Let's say that again. Your brain adapts to the environment, the regimen that you're doing before the physiology, the muscle. So you can see that if you're switching your program because your brain's telling you that it's getting bored, it needs something new, because that's what starts going on in your brain. It starts sending messages like that to you. So what you do, because it all starts with control tower, your brain, the mindset, your body follows along, right? So when your brain is telling you to change, know this, that you're really not ready to change because your muscle hasn't fully adapted. That's where it's at. So again, it's counterintuitive. And that's where most people make a big mistake, is they go ahead and change, and they keep doing that over and over again because that process repeats itself. Do you see where that could become a problem as far as, I mean, look, if you're going to go to the gym and put yourself on a training program, or you're working out, don't you want to get the most out of your training, like from day one? And if you're that person that really understands that question and you answer it with, yeah, I want my progress to start happening from day one, then this is something that you'll address, okay? And I'll help you with that. There's a 21-day rule. So you might be asking, well, when should I change? Because, you know, if you're not seasoned enough, if you're not a veteran, how would you know that? Well, 21-day rule. And here's what I mean by that. It takes your body 21 days of a training regimen, doing the same routine, basically. It takes your body 21 days before it starts adapting to that environment, before it starts to adapt. It's not fully adapted at 21 days. So, but at the 21-day mark, you'll start noticing now, that's when your physiology, the muscle, is actually adapted. So you've overridden, in this case, what the brain was telling you, because your brain already said it wanted to change already a week and a half ago. But you overruled that, and you got into the 21-day mark, now you're starting to adapt. The body is starting to adapt. Now, and we've talked about this on other programs, in that 21 days, your body's starting to go into what's known as a plateau. And the plateau is a necessary evil because of the fact that we're talking about it now. That's where the body, now the physiology, the muscle is fully adapting. So 21 days is at the 3-week mark. And I can tell you from personal experience that you can stay in that plateau or that sweet spot for about 3 weeks. So you go into it at week 3 and stay in it till about week 6. You would be okay if you did that and then make a change to your program. And mind you, you don't have to make a big change. Small changes to your body are actually big changes. In fact, I would highly recommend that you make small changes and not big ones. Your body hates big changes. You'll get a negative result unless you're doing something very specific, like I've talked about in this lockdown program that I have, which is a weight loss system, fat loss, actually, I should say. And when you do something like what we do there dramatically, but for a very short period of time, that's not so bad. It's when you do that, when you're making big changes on a regular basis. So if you're following what your brain is telling you and you're changing too often, that's too drastic. You're going to go in reverse. Your body is going to continually go through a setback when you're taking that approach. So keep that in mind. So let's recap that. Okay, you want to stay on a training regimen for between 3 and 6 weeks. Between 3 and 6 weeks is the sweet spot. It's also known as the plateau that you're entering in, but that's also where the sweet spot is. Stay in that sweet spot from anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks before moving on and changing and making changes to your training regimen. Okay? Let's talk about now the way that you're exercising, the way that the approach that you're taking in when you're setting up your exercise. And there should be an approach. Your body loves repetition. And when you do a lot of repetitions, in other words, in the same way, then all of a sudden you're not having to think about how you're setting up your exercises. And this applies to all exercise. Okay? Keep this in mind. In order to be the most efficient, you want to set your body up from the ground up. Meaning, when you're doing an exercise, set your feet. What I mean by that is you're going to set your feet either narrow, wide, or what I like to use is the default of being shoulder width apart. You're always safe if you set your feet, shoulder width apart. Always. So start from the ground up, you set your feet. The next thing that you do is set your hands. So if you're doing a lat pull down, for example, as an example, you could be a chest press, whatever. You set your hands either shoulder width apart or slightly wider than shoulders. But I would just say as a default, set your hands shoulder width apart. Okay? And you're always set that way. Now, the next thing, we call these points of interest, by the way. There are 4 points of interest in the way you set your body up. We talked about 2 of them, your feet and your hands. The next thing is you have a starting point for every exercise. So know your starting point. Now your body is, now you're doing this in a methodology where you're doing the same thing every time. So when you get to the point where you set your feet, you set your hands, you now have a starting point, and then you have a finish point. That's the exact order that you should take when you're setting up your exercises, no matter what it is. When you do this, because repetition is the mother of skill, then all of a sudden you don't have to think about that. It's one less thing that you need to give energy to. That makes sense. So if you're constantly changing that approach, let's say that you start setting the body up, as an example, from the top down, and you're not doing the same thing. Well, your body is having to think about that. And if you want to be efficient, you want to be in a mode when you're training where you're not really thinking about all those things, because all you should be thinking about is mind and muscle connection, feeling the exercise, feeling what you train. Kind of like a batter in a batter's box. Think about this. If that batter is constantly thinking about where their feet are or where their hands are, how can they really focus on the pitcher who's throwing a 90-mile fastball? Do you see where I'm getting? That's the reason why batters, because, again, repetition is the mother of skill with them. Just like what I'm talking about with setting up an exercise, your exercise in a way. It gets to the point for that batter that they're not thinking about all that. They don't think about where their feet are, their hands are. They're just there to let their mind focus on whatever it's doing. Because when you're training, you should be in a hypnotic type trance, believe it or not. And that's one of the things that always irks me when I'm in a gym, when I see people smiling, laughing, and talking. I get it. You know, not everybody's there to train like a bodybuilder and have that kind of mentality and focus. But I keep saying, if you're really there to get the most out of your training program, you'll do that. You'll do what I'm telling you to do as it relates to setting yourself up in an exercise beforehand so you can make it the most efficient in the actual amount of reps that you're doing. Okay? Think about that. Focus on that and work on that. This is going to take discipline. You're not going to just do this once in a while. You do this all the time until it becomes seamless. All of a sudden, it's like you're not thinking about it anymore, and then you're doing it right all the time. The next thing that we'll talk about is ice cream. Ice cream sometimes gets a bad rap, but actually ice cream is a better carbohydrate, for example, than a baked potato. Maybe you're asking why. Well, it has to do with the fat content in the ice cream. A baked potato has a very high glycemic index value, which simply means that it breaks down very quickly in your body. And your body uses it very quickly, and then you crash. So that's a simple type of sugar. Ice cream, on the other hand, especially when you eat the ice cream that's got all the fat in it, what that fat does to the simple sugar that's within that ice cream, the profile of that ice cream, is that it slows the release of that sugar down into your bloodstream. So all of a sudden now ice cream is a longer lasting energy. And the thing about it is this: these are little tricks of the trade that the student of the game who's a bodybuilder, they really know how to weaponize the tools that they have right in front of them. Not only with weight training, because, you know, if you're that person that's weight training, going back to that a little bit, you're not focusing on the amount of repetitions that you're doing. You're not really focusing on the amount of weight that you're doing. You're focusing on how the body is fatiguing, because that's all the body, the physiology really understands, is your fatigue level and your recovery levels. And when you get to that point where, you know, like I said, you're in a hypnotic trance, now you know what your body really needs. Otherwise, the rest of you really don't. You're training, you know, willy-nilly to some degree, and your results reflect that. And the same thing when it comes to diet and knowing how to weaponize your macros. And this is a classic example. And I can tell you this right now, for those of you who are having fluctuations in your energy throughout the day, I can promise you this: it either has to do with the fact that you're not eating enough calories for your body, but probably more than likely, it has to do with you not having enough fat with each meal. And I highly recommend that you do that. It's really funny, but when I eat, I see food so differently that probably the average person does. And I when I go to eat, I'm thinking, okay, how do I feel today? This is how we get when we get to the point where, You've done so many repetitions and you fed yourself so many times in different ways that you just really understand your body. Most of us don't. We really don't understand our body as it relates to what it needs in terms of energy, what it needs in terms of exercise. But when you get to that point, all of a sudden it's like when I go to have my meal, I'm thinking, okay, how am I feeling right now? Am I feeling kind of puny? I need a little more carbohydrate. Maybe I don't eat as much fat in that particular diet. Weaponizing your macros. And the last thing that we'll cover is going to be a little trick of the trade that I have been talking about on my Instagram posts about making nutrition simple. Same way with weight training. And some of these things that I'm talking about actually fall within that mindset and that strategy. But I call it the fist diet. Okay. So if you're that person, and I want to clarify something always at all times, and when we talk about nutrition, you have to know your calories. You have to know your caloric intake. You have to count calories. Again, it's one of those things that is a discipline that you learn, just like what we've been talking about today on how to set up your exercise and some of the things that we've been talking about. It's about developing a discipline, and you're having to think a lot about that in the beginning. Maybe that's not worth it to you. I'm always speaking from the position of how to do things in the most efficient way. So if you're that person that is out, for example, at a restaurant, let's just say that, and you're not sure what how many calories or the average serving size is, let's say it that way. You don't know what the average serving size is of the different foods that you've gotten. And it doesn't matter whether it's a protein, any kind of food, hash browns, whatever food that's been put in front of you. Here's a really easy way to determine average serving size. You make a fist and you put your fist over the food. Like if the food's right here, plate, I simply just put it over the plate like that. Okay? Not too high and not too low. Just above it, maybe a couple inches. If you cannot see that food around the edges of your hand, guess what you have? An average serving size. And you might be thinking, well, how can that be? Well, think about it. Look at your wrist and look at if you're married, look at your wife's wrists and look at your wrists. Her serving size is going to be different than yours. Our hands making a fist like that, I said wrist, but I meant your hand. When you make a fist like that, our hands are all different sizes, but that size of your hand coincides, believe it or not, with an average serving size. So you can just simply, people might think you're whacked and crazy at a restaurant, but you can just simply go like this on that plate. And then if nothing else, if you just remembered, I had a serving size and a half or two serving size. Yeah, 2 fists of protein. You can easily remember that. And then if you're looking it up as far as calories per ounce, but at least you have the average serving size. That is one of the quick things that you can do no matter where you're at. And if you can continue to make whatever you're doing on a daily seamless, easy to do, it's just a part of your daily life. If you can get to that point, it doesn't seem like work anymore. It doesn't seem like a big hassle to do all this stuff. Because I understand that. I understand how that can be. Listen, we're all busy. We all got stuff going on. And to add one more thing, sometimes it's a breaking point for some of us. I get that. But all the things that I'm talking about are tools that you can use for the purposes of streamlining and making yourself more efficient. It's a beautiful thing because nothing that I talk to you about is something that's going to compromise your result and the benefit. And I think that's where you need to get to. All right. So listen, that's going to be it for today. I really appreciate you guys tuning in, and I hope to see you on another episode of Straight Talk. Take care.